Welcome everyone to another episode of Kiwi Talks. I'm honored to have my guest today, who has quite the resume. She is the CEO of For Our Good. She is on the trustee board for Go Eco, and she is currently running for the mayor title in Hamilton. I'd like to introduce Louise Hutt.
Kia ora, thank you for having me.
Well, good. Thank you for being here. Um, One of the things I want to know is why you decided to run for being mayor, because politics isn't everyone's cup of tea and it can be hard.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely true. It's a story that I tell quite a lot. And it depends on whether or not you want the 5-second version or if you want the slightly longer and more interesting version.
Whatever you feel more comfortable with telling.
Um, so the voter turnout in Hamilton in the last election was like 33%.
Right.
So that's a lot of Hamilton who didn't vote and, not engaged in our political discussions or our political leadership, I guess, of our city. And so I'm kind of a nerd. Like, the last election, I didn't really know what council did, and I went out of my way to kind of research, like, what does council do? Why is this important? Because it feels like something important. Like, when the government sends you letters in the post and is like, hey, tell us what you think about this. To me, I'm kind of like, oh, shit. Like, I should probably do something about that. So, yeah, last election, I really went out of my way to kind of figure out what this local body stuff was. And finding out that, yeah, nearly 70% of Hamilton didn't vote, to me was like, oh, okay. So why this question of like, why are we not engaged? Because I think when you think about it from a 70%,
Well, it's a
that's,
big number.
well, yeah, I mean, it's not you as an individual, right? That's not an individual problem when so much of our city's feeling that way.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was thinking about how, you know, we have a lot of incumbents run and run again and run again. And it creates a lot of career politicians. And would also been we, Hamilton City Council, had been in the news quite a lot about councillors behaving badly. And I have some friends and family in Auckland, and I went to visit them around the end of last year. And I remember having a conversation with one of my friends where she was saying, like, but your city councillor did this. Like, isn't that so embarrassing? And I was like, like, yes, it is. And I remember, having that conversation with her and being like, she knows who our councillors are. And she lives in Auckland.
Yeah, that's probably not a good sign.
But how many, people in Hamilton could name city councillors or even name who the mayor is? And so that kind of really got me thinking, like, okay, if people want to talk to me as somebody who's quite proudly from Hamilton about embarrassing stuff that our council has done, like, that to me is not great leadership. We should be talking about all the great stuff council does, because there is loads of great stuff that council does. So how can we kind of change that conversation? And if it's the same people running all the time, that's not gonna interest the 70%, nearly 70% of people who didn't vote last time.
Particularly if they don't fit within their age group or.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for me personally, I didn't really see anyone who I felt got the situation that I'm in, where I'm at in life and the kind of experiences that I've had. There's certainly people who are sympathetic or people who are, yeah, sympathetic to the situation, but that's different from knowing it because you've lived it and knowing it because you've been there and you understand the realities of it. So like for me, a really interesting thing that's happened lately is our house is up for sale, and me and my partner rent, and it's kind of like cool. So this is going to be the eighth time if the house sells and we can't stay there. It's going to be the eighth time I've moved house since I came to Hamilton 8 years ago. So that's fairly disruptive in terms of.
Do you have a lot of stuff?
I have so much stuff.
Okay, well then that makes it twice as bad.
You should see what our garage looks like, yeah. And like that's just like one example of something, which is, how many other mayoral candidates are going to have to move house a month before the election?
True.
It's kind of like, okay, and I've been a student here. I've lived off, study link and what 2 part-time jobs will give you. And that's pretty bleak, you know. I've had to use our public transport because, you know, I couldn't afford to drive my car. Experienced that firsthand of how, you know, scary it can be when the last bus doesn't turn up, or when, you know, you're using the sometimes good app that tells you when the bus is coming and then they magically disappear off the app and you're like, oh heck, okay.
I didn't even know there was an app.
Yeah.
Not
So-
up with the plate.
But like for me, you know, that's the kind of sometimes pointy end of the services council provides. And I think that it's really important to have people sitting at that council table who've experienced them and who like know about them because that's their reality and that's their life, rather than, you know, people who have had a council salary or been career politicians and not been necessarily not had their opinions informed by the realities of our city for a while. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense.
That's a really long answer to the first question. I'm
But
so
no,
sorry.
it's good. It's good. So if you were to become the mayor,
Mhm.
what would be some of the policies you'd put through or want to put through?
Well, that's a really interesting topic because as the mayor, you're one person.
Yeah, well, I discussed this with Andrew King,
Yeah.
and he was explaining to me how the structure of the council actually works.
Yeah.
And so basically, the mayor kind of sets the idea of what they want to implement, and then the councillors actually decide whether it gets approved or not.
Yeah. And you really need consensus, and you really need to be able to collaborate with the other people at that table. And I think probably the most important thing a mayor can bring to the table is a vision and something that, like, an ability to be able to get people in behind that vision
Yeah.
and understand it and, you know, appreciate why.
Well, as someone who is been through the hardships of studying, and you know you've passed and now you're a CEO.
Yeah.
Do you look at some things within the city now that you're just like, oh, I hate this. I want to change this.
Well, there's some things like the free buses for under 18s that I'm like, oh, I would.
You don't like it? Or
No, like I would have loved that. Like,
right, when you were
like,
studying.
I would have absolutely loved that. And so there's some things now that I think like, dang, I wish that I had that, you know,
All those.
however long ago. But then, you know, there are things that like I certainly get frustrated about in our city. So I ride an e-scooter and I live in Frankton. I don't know if you've ever seen the footpaths in Frankton.
It's been a while. I haven't been around there lately, no.
They're kind of there's a pothole every, I don't know, 10 meters. There's a weird lump. There's people parking on the footpaths. This is just like the most niche example I could think of, but
Yeah.
you know, for me on an e-scooter, I go so slow and I'm like a nana e-scooter driver. Which is fine, but you know, I think about people who are wheelchair users, or I think about, you know, parents with prams, and I think about how hard that must be for them. And you know, I know that the Hamilton City Council has approved a trial of e-scooters in the city, and that's quite, to me, that's great. But I think what it's gonna show is that we need better infrastructure for things like cycling and things like e-scootering, because if you have, you know, if you have somebody being reckless on an e-scooter on the footpath, you know, your pedestrians are the ones who are gonna, you know, suffer the consequences of that. And it's like, cool, well, where could we put them? It's like, you don't want to put them on the road.
No.
That's a very, very squishy time.
Yeah.
You become very aware of just, you know, how fragile the human body is. But, you know, I think stuff like that, you know, I don't see a future in which we don't have e-scooters, you know, because for one, whether we have big companies coming in and bringing them or whether people just buy them,
Yeah.
you're going to have them, you know. And so I see stuff like more cycleways as a really, really basic way of just, you know, prepping our city for the future.
Yeah. I think it's good for the environment as well.
Totally. Well, I mean, we've had it, oh gosh, I don't know how many months we've had our e-scooter now. We've done over 200 kilometers on it. So that's the equivalent of like Hamilton to Ruapehu.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's so many trips where I haven't driven, you know, and that's predominantly trips where I would have driven to say into the CBD to go to the movies or you know, to the post office, to the bank or whatever.
I actually have never used one. What?
I wish I was gonna e-scooter here, and then I was like, oh, it's slightly too far. I don't want to get stranded at your house.
That's all good. I can always drop you off after. But how much do they cost to operate?
So our one cost $600. So
Just buy it?
just to buy it, yeah.
Okay.
You buy them from PB Tech. I wish I was on commission. But the interesting thing is that e-bikes are worth like $2,000, $4,000, $8,000 and do kind of effectively the same thing in terms of like they're a motorized form of personal transport.
Yeah.
But you think about what's a $8,000 commitment versus $600.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, $600 is still not affordable for loads and loads of people, but you know, in the grand scheme of things, that's going to get way more people out of their cars, you know, zipping around the city than
How
e-bikes.
long does it take to charge?
A couple of hours.
Oh yeah, that's pretty good.
You know what a laptop charger looks like, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, effectively that. Plug it in.
Okay, and then a couple of hours, it's ready to go.
Yeah.
How long does it last for?
You can do about 30 kilometers.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
pretty decent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ah,
Mm.
nice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Maybe I should consider one.
They're also very fun.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing is that, you know, like driving in the car is not always like a fun experience. Sometimes it's slightly frustrating. Sometimes it's a little bit like,
Well, I'm from Auckland, so
I'm preaching to the converted here.
Yeah, I know firsthand what traffic is like. You just
Yeah. So, you know, if you think of something which is also kind of like, I don't know, maybe this is a nerdy way of describing it, but kind of joyful, like I love being on the scooter. It's really fun.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good way of doing it. So besides from climate change and infrastructure,
Mhm.
what are the other things you'd like to see change within the city?
I read the comments on your YouTube videos.
Which ones?
One
All
of
of them.
well, some of the recent ones, and they said like, "Oh, you've got politicians coming on, and they're so boring." So I'm really sorry that this is going to be a boring answer. I just want to like preemptively apologize to the internet.
This is the thing about people who comment. It doesn't. So you might say something that somebody hates. But it might resonate with someone else.
That's true.
So don't worry about them. They're just going to comment no matter what. So just say whatever it is you want to say, and let the haters hate. Yeah.
Fair. So one thing I'd really like to see. So we have a university, we have polytechnics, we have te wānanga in the city. So that's a huge level of like expertise that we have locally.
Yeah.
And what we're kind of been missing from this last like council term is having panels or committees of experts informing what council does.
Okay, are you referring to climate in this instance?
Oh,
or just anything?
Anything.
Okay.
And I think that it would be really, really valuable to bring that kind of that level of informing back to council, because like I'm not a climate scientist.
And I'm pretty sure most councillors and probably even the mayor aren't expertise on climate.
Yeah, and I mean like there's lots of people who aren't like I'm not an expert on lots of things.
Yeah.
But I think that like what I do in my role as a CEO is I gather information.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I look at what research or what studies or what people I can talk to inform the decisions I make so that I know I'm making the best ones.
Right.
And so I'd really like to see us kind of use our universities, use our tertiary education providers to, you know, basically be informing and making sure that we are making the best decisions. Because I think that at the end of the day, you need to be trusting your council, you know?
Definitely.
And I think that, you know, knowing that they're using experts who are, you know, cutting edge research, you know, that's all the juicy stuff that I think allows people to make better decisions. So why not use that when it's just here?
Yeah.
And it's another reason to be proud of Hamilton. We're the youngest and most highly educated city in New Zealand.
The thing is, a lot of people don't know that.
Oh, no.
And Hamilton gets a ridiculously bad stereotype. Like, I remember when I moved here from Auckland.
Yeah.
98% of the people who I told I was moving to Hamilton, they were just like, "Why? What's wrong with you?"
Yeah.
don't get an STI, or just stupid stuff like
Yeah.
that.
And it's not even true.
Yeah, it's not even true.
Yeah.
I think it's just, same with Palmerston North, actually. That gets a bit of a bad rap as well, but I don't understand why it is.
Yeah, it's certainly something that when I've talked to young people, youths, I say that as a 26-year-old, that is something that's a concern. That reputation where, people are going to make fun of you because you're from Hamilton. I think like that's the most like.
I think as time goes on, it will fade, but
Yeah. Well, I think we need to be proud. Like, we need to be proud of ourselves. And I think that, there are a lot of people. Oh, I mean, this is something that I do at least. When people are like, you're from Hamilton? I'm like, yeah, and Hamilton's great. Like,
Yeah.
like,
don't give them a chance to answer.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to, like, I said this on Twitter the other day. I was like, I unfriended one of my uncles because he said Hamilton was shit one too many times. And I was just like, I don't have time for this.
Yeah. And when you actually ask people why it's terrible, they usually don't have a good answer. They probably actually haven't even been here, so they don't even know. They're just going off what other people have said.
Yeah. So I used to run this project called Handmade in Hamilton, and it was kind of about supporting local businesses and encouraging people to buy locally and ethically and sustainable, particularly over Christmas when people tend to buy more. And we did 12 days of giveaways one year, and we worked with some really amazing local brands like Good George, Celiac, Rocket Coffee, all of those kind of like epic places from Hamilton that you think like, yeah, they're from here. And then what I did was the second year, I partnered with another local businesswoman, and her name was Michelle Bailey, and we came up with this concept of doing a map of Hamilton. And so what you could do is you could pick up this map anywhere in town, and basically it would show you all of the really cool local stuff that was going on. So, businesses, cafes, whatever. And what you could do is you could kind of plot a route around the city seeing all of these things. So if you were coming to Hamilton, you're like, oh, what am I going to do in Hamilton? You could pick one of these up and be like, oh, heck. And what I did was I integrated that with Google Maps. So you could go on our website and open this Handmade in Hamilton Google Map. And then you could just click whatever 3, 4, 5, whatever you wanted to see. And then Google Maps will say, cool, that'll take, I don't know, 20 minutes to walk between these ones. And, there's your afternoon sorted.
Yeah.
And it's stuff like that when, so much of my reasoning behind getting involved with this and creating this as a project was my friends from Wellington would come and visit, and I would end up giving them tours of Hamilton and being like, there's this great thing, there's this great thing, there's this great thing. And then I realized like that's not really scalable as a tourist thing. You know, I only have so many hours in the day in which to give people tours of our city.
Right.
And so this was a really kind of cool way of using technology and using, working closely with local businesses to kind of show people from out of town all of the epic stuff that we actually have here.
Yeah, because when I think of tourism in Hamilton or things to show, it's usually the gardens, the zoo, and probably the museum. Yeah. That's about all I got. I don't know if you know anything else.
Well, lots of what I wanted to do with my friends, or stuff my friends wanted to do, was like, can we just go get coffee? Like, can we just have a nice meal somewhere? And, can we look at the river? And, what are some cool shops where we can take cool Hamilton merch back home? Or, where's the Boone Street art in the city? The kind of, obviously buying coffee costs money, but going and looking at some street art doesn't cost money.
No, it doesn't.
Going for a walk on the river trail doesn't cost money. Obviously the zoo kind of costs money. The gardens doesn't, and I love that about the gardens.
Yeah, and I think they're expanding on the gardens. They're going to be adding more gardens. Yeah. I took one of my friends from Auckland to the gardens, and he didn't realize how big it was. Yeah. And I think we got to about 6, and he's like, bro, I think I'm done with gardens, man. How many are there? I'm like, man, we can be here all day. He's like, oh, can we go do something else? Because there's just so many. You can easily spend a whole day there.
Oh, me and one of my campaign team, we had like a day off a couple of weekends ago. And we're like, oh, we'll just go for a walk around the gardens. And we were there for 6 hours. And we came out of it, and I was like, wait, what's the? Oh no, like, what's the time?
Yeah. It's so easy. Good cardio.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've never done so many steps in my life.
Yeah. Does your phone tell you if you've got 10,000 steps?
My
Oh,
Fitbit
you got your
does.
watch.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Are you for or against the ferry bank plan and the Waikato Regional Theatre?
I mean, I
Because
think.
I know you watched the podcast with Andrew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it would be really dumb to look a gift horse in the mouth when the government's going to give you lots of money.
I agree.
So if somebody's like, "Hey, we're going to fund this thing," as a potentially incoming councillor,
That's
there's
why I think
no
ECOC
way.
is
Yeah.
ECOC is good. Some of the things that Andrew told me, I was, oh yeah, I agreed with. Not everything. There's
Yeah.
some things that I didn't agree with, but yeah, his reasoning for the Waikato Regional Theatre, I thought was good, even though there's some people who are totally against it.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, so like I did a Bachelor of Media and Creative Technologies and then I did a Master of Media and Creative Technologies, and that's kind of putting together technology and art, kind of in one degree.
Yeah.
So the art world is something that I have kind of, art and music and, all of that kind of different mediums is a space that I once seriously considered a career in and then was like, cool, there is no money. There's no money in that.
Yep, that's the same problem I've found with music.
Yeah.
No money in it.
Yeah, and for me it was filmmaking. That was predominantly what I did, filmmaking, graphic design, and photography. And when I think about, from my personal experience, what our creative communities need, they need space and time to develop their art or their craft or whatever it is. Nobody's born and then is magically Michael Jackson, or
No.
magically Richard O'Brien, the person we have a statue of in our city. And so I think it's really great. We'll have a regional theatre to put on amazing events and performances. But what are we doing to support our community to get there?
Yeah, I can only think of Zeal.
Mm-hmm.
That's about the extent of it. I can't really think of anything. There's probably little niche pockets here and there, but
yeah, and I think from my perspective of what council can do, I mean, currently arts funding is sandwiched with community funding and cultural funding. They all compete for the same pool, and that to me seems like a really difficult space to kind of
manage.
Yeah, and they serve different purposes to different, like, those kind of events. And so you're not really, in my opinion, comparing apples with apples when you're comparing, applications for funding for things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, for me, I'd love to see more funding for our grassroots events. I'd love to see more stuff like if you take Boone Street, for example. I mean, the visual impact on our city is huge. I mean, it transforms our city into a far more beautiful place to look at and to be.
Yeah.
And then I was looking at, I don't know if you know TJ. She's a local musician. So much of her music video from her latest single is shot with Boone Street in the background.
Can you send me the link?
Yeah.
I'll be keen to watch it.
Yeah, and it's just like, I know that Boone Street might be something which is a little bit hard to tangibly show, here are the figures of how much money it made us.
Yeah.
But if you think about the cultural richness it gives us,
Yeah, well, some people say, oh, Hamilton doesn't have any culture.
I get
Yeah. I think I remember you mentioning that you wanted to see more high density housing?
Yep.
Yeah.
There is an asterisk on that. Good high density housing.
True. That is important. You don't want it to be moldy or falling apart.
Yeah, I mean, so I grew up on the Coromandel in a really small town called Whangamata.
I love that town.
Yeah, lots of people do.
Yeah.
And I predominantly lived in. We moved around quite a lot. My mum moved house 7 times in 3 years.
Yeah.
And so I got to experience a raft of different houses.
Yeah.
And lots of that, though, was, a single house on a section.
Mhm.
I moved to Hamilton. In the 8 different houses I've lived in, there's only been one which wasn't high density. So from my perspective of, living here and living in, 8 different places around our city, I've lived in shit,
Yeah.
really, really shit, high density,
Yeah.
where, it was concrete block flats, which was freezing and, like no insulation and, no consideration of the turning circle on a car when you're trying to reverse out of a car park.
Yeah. Are these like really, really old high density?
They are really, yeah. It's a lot of the older stuff, which is not really...
Because obviously new houses these days have to have insulation,
Yes,
which
yes.
is good. But, I mean, they've just brought in this rule where you have to have insulation in your ceilings and floor. But it doesn't really do that much.
It's still only the ceiling and the floor,
Yeah,
You've still got walls.
Yeah, and it still gets very, very cold.
Yeah. And so for me, like, we currently live in a townhouse which is only 1 year old. Well, it's not even 1 year old. It is by far the nicest place I've ever lived in my whole life. Partly because it's brand new, but also because, we have a dishwasher. We have a heat pump. And I think that, when I think about what makes this place good, it's also the fact that, we have a little garden and it's not weed mat, and we have a hedge and we have, a garage with a shared driveway and everybody can get their cars out of the shared driveway and nobody yet has dinged anyone's fence,
Yeah.
It's like there's actually been thought into the everyday use of the house and not just like how many people can we cram into this tiny space.
Yeah.
Because for me, like, my partner might disagree with this, but I don't really see a future for me soon, in the near future, living in a house with a big section. I don't see that as a reality for me.
Yeah, well, housing is becoming more and more unaffordable, particularly for young people.
Yeah.
I've had this discussion with some of my friends and even one of my previous guests, Tracy. But, when you think that a lot of young people, they go to uni, they get these $50,000, $60,000 student loans.
Mine is 60.
Yeah?
So there you go.
There you go. So, and then you're required to pay that back.
Yep.
Plus, you got to save a 20% deposit to buy a house.
Yep.
Now, in Auckland, that's near enough impossible
Yep.
unless you're studying or you're doing law or something.
Yeah.
And it's only a matter of time before Hamilton starts getting a bit ridiculous as well. I mean, there's already places in Cambridge that are on par with Auckland. And a lot of Aucklanders are moving down these ways. So it's becoming really, really unaffordable. And I do worry how younger people especially, are going to get into the property market. Because it's not even about, the housing has become a business. It's not actually about,
someone's home.
Someone's home.
Yeah.
It's just viewed in dollar signs.
Yeah.
And that's a worldwide thing.
It's not unique to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, I think, maybe the unique selling point or whatever you want to call of me as a candidate. So I'm the youngest CEO of an electricity company in New Zealand, and electricity is a core service. Housing is a core service. Lots of what council does is your core services. And I know that for me, if making sure that people's power is connected is critical. The level of responsibility of ensuring that everything runs the way it's supposed to run and everything works the way it's supposed to work, because if you screw that up, the outcomes or the consequences of that can be incredibly serious. That's the kind of responsibility that I live with every day. And I think that sometimes I'd like to see more of that concern of the end user's well-being, or what are the everyday realities of the decisions that we make. And that's something that
is that something council can do though, or local government?
Well, council and local government are the same thing.
I mean central government.
I mean, central government certainly has a huge, huge part to play in that, but I think as well, when you go back to high density housing, for example,
Yeah.
ensuring that it's, considered properly and, is not a nightmare for the people who end up living there. Council has some rules or some, policies that they can put in place around how that happens and what it looks like. So, people don't just see dollar signs when they see, four empty sections in a row and think, great, how many can we fit in here?
Yeah. Unfortunately, some people, I don't see them changing their minds on that.
Oh, for sure. And I mean,
Just,
but the thing about council, right, is that it's about balance. So it's about balancing.
which is a very hard thing to do.
Oh, for sure.
Because every decision you make, you're going to piss some people off and you're going to
For
make
sure.
some people happy, no matter what.
Yeah.
No matter what. Unless probably rates, that just pisses off everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very, very tricky. Very, very tricky.
I think, though, that comes back to, again, the role of what the mayor does as the leader, effectively, of a council, but also of a city, is being able to explain to people and, help them understand why you're doing stuff.
Yeah.
You have to be having those conversations where you're saying, hey, look, I know that you might not like this, but, like, here's the greater benefit that we see this happening.
Transparency is
Yeah.
so key.
Yeah, and
because I
that's-
think there's a lot of misinformation out there,
For sure.
which is one of the reasons why I wanted to have yourself on and why I had Andrew on, so they had a platform to talk for however long they needed to get the point across. Because I think when they're on radio or on television for 10 minutes, they have to condense a whole bunch of
It's
information.
all sound bites.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And stuff can be misinterpreted quite easily.
Yeah.
So I think transparency is very, very important. But then people have to be open
Yeah.
to it as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, something really interesting that I've found in talking about things with people is, especially around inequality, if you're somebody who doesn't experience the negative side of inequality, you might think, like, why should I give a shit? Why should I care?
Yeah.
This doesn't affect me. These other people should just, toughen up or whatever.
Whatever.
And it's been really interesting having these discussions with people and saying, I totally get that you're in this position where that's not a problem for you. Like, totally understand that that's what's informing your perspective. But can I tell you a story about somebody who is impacted by that and how that changes their life and how that, limits the things that they can do and the things they can achieve with, their time on Earth.
Yeah.
And, having those conversations where you're kind of growing people's perspective on the world and, encouraging things like empathy, to me, is really, really valuable in kind of, making sure that you bring people along with you and people understand why you're doing things. Because, yeah, at the end of the day, there's probably lots of things in council which don't personally affect me. Or, like free buses doesn't personally affect me because I'm over the age of 18.
Yeah.
But I'm still like, great.
But it's great for young people.
Yeah.
Because young people do not have a lot of money to spare.
Yeah.
Or they have no money.
Yeah.
Period. So.
Yeah, and well, like, that was the interesting thing with our house going up for sale was, we had this conversation with the real estate agent who was really lovely and really, really thoughtful in speaking to us. But he was like, would you want to put an offer in? We were just like, no. But the other side of it, is that in running for council, the median spend for the mayoral candidates last election was $50,000. And we would probably need a bit over that if we were to put a deposit on the house.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I didn't have $50,000 before I ran for mayor, and I definitely don't have $50,000 now.
Yeah.
I don't have it for a house deposit either,
Well, it's interesting because when I lived in Auckland, I'd often have these conversations with a lot of my friends up there. And I've moved down here, and nearly all of them, 95% of them, are still in the exact same position they were before I left. And this was about 4 years ago. And some are just hoping that a crash happens.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't think they really realize the impact. They're just thinking of themselves personally, but it affects a lot more than what they realize in terms of the whole country and the economy. And then there's the people who poured blood, sweat, and tears just to save the money to get a house, And then if they're living pay week to pay week just to pay the mortgage, and
Yeah.
then, you know, their house plunges in value, then
Yeah.
they're screwed, really. So
Yeah.
it's difficult. Have you done much traveling at all?
Not not really, because I've never had the finances for it, but I did I got a scholarship when I was doing my masters, and I used some of that money to go over to the UK for a conference on my master's thesis topic.
Oh, wow.
So I went to London and Dublin for that. But I mean, like, if I had not got a $10,000 scholarship, I would not have gone.
So you obviously with going to London, can you tell how everything,
Yeah.
it's mostly townhouses, very things
Yep.
small, there's not these big sections like we have here.
Yeah.
And part of it, because part of the problem I find with New Zealand is we build out as opposed to up.
Yep.
Where every other country I've been to does not do that. I mean, Wellington, not really, but that's because there's just hills everywhere. So
Yeah.
they were forced to build up in terms of the CBD. But if
Yep.
you look at Auckland, for its population, it actually shouldn't spread out as wide as it does.
Yep.
And then as a result, you get massive traffic congestion and traffic problems.
Yep.
So I think the high density housing also solves a lot of the traffic issues as well.
For sure. I mean, I when I was in London, admittedly I was there for a week, but I house sat for some friends of mine who lived in Hackney, and they lived off one of the huge parks in London, and it was this 3-story, effectively townhouse, on a huge block of, you know, flat.
Yeah.
But it was beautiful. It was right next to, it was right literally across the road from this huge park. There were so many buses and trains, and, you know, anything I wanted to catch, I could. You know, London is a huge place.
Oh, yeah.
And I navigated that on, I don't know, 2 hours sleep, like it was the easiest thing in the world.
Well, their public transport is so damn good. So damn
I mean, they'll
good.
still complain about it if you ask somebody from London.
Oh, yeah, but it just comes down to perspective,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
But I think, like, that's the thing, when I think about the value that high density brings. Yeah, you don't have a backyard. You have to go and share your green space with, you know, somebody else. But you have green space. You have huge, beautiful parks. You have, you know, easy access to your amenities because there are more people living in that area, so there's higher demand for it. You know, you don't have to drive all the way out to find a supermarket, or, you know, there's demand for public transport because there's simply the people living there to need it. And yep, peacocks is going to happen. There's no kind of like no take backs on peacocks, but putting in new suburbs, putting in the infrastructure for new suburbs, which is what councils are responsible for, to some degree, is expensive.
Very expensive.
And
I mean, I wonder how much those houses in Peacock are going to cost.
Yeah.
A
And
lot, I would
so
say.
for me, it's like, you know, people are always concerned about rates rising, and, you know, high density housing is one way of balancing the extreme cost of always sprawling, and, you know, the cost that has on individuals of, you know, yes, you have your beautiful section with your house in the middle of it,
Yeah.
but you don't have your amenities. You need to drive your car. You know, transport emissions, particularly from all of us owning cars as individuals, is the second highest contributor to carbon emissions in New Zealand. And so
Yeah.
high density housing, if you think of that as something which, you know, promotes public transport use, is, again, like Andrew talked about this a lot, but, you know, it's one way of, you know, lessening those carbon emissions.
Yeah, I think people would be open to public transport if it was good.
Well, it has to be cheap,
It has to be
easy, and reliable.
Yes. And I mean, I was reading this week about how the train busted in Wellington, and
Yeah.
I lived in Auckland, and I used to hear all the time about friends catching the train, and the train would break down. And then when I was in Auckland, I'd wait to catch the bus, and then sometimes the bus just wouldn't even show up.
Yep.
So
I used to work in the CBD, and I used to live in Beta, and I would try and work as late as I could to get as many hours in, and then I would try to catch the last bus home, and sometimes it just didn't turn up. Sometimes it would drive past me.
So what'd you do? Walk home?
Yeah, and try
Really?
imagine walking from the CBD along the river path with no lighting, or I could walk through like the hospital route to get to Beta at like 7, 8 o'clock at night in the middle of winter.
There might be people listening to this that don't know what Beta is. A pretty rough suburb I know I have friends in Auckland who are probably listening to this, so that's like the equivalent of Otara. Just thought I'd put that out there. Anyway, keep going with your story.
I loved living there, but but yeah, I mean that was really really difficult to me, and not having buses run, like having the last bus run at something, it was like I don't know 7:10 is hard.
Yeah.
But again, it's all about balancing it. If people don't use it, there's no demand for it, so you can't put in more of it that makes it better.
Yeah, well, it's
a vicious cycle.
Yeah, that's why when I asked Andrew, because he wants to get more people using buses, and I said, well, you need to have bus lanes so people can get into. And his argument for that was actually pretty valid, I thought, in terms of get people on the buses first, then you can justify the reasoning to put in more bus lanes.
Well, I think as well you need to think like how many people do you fit in a bus? So you fit 35.
Yeah.
That's still 35 cars if we're all driving individually.
Which is a lot.
Not on the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good idea. What's your thoughts on the Hamilton to Auckland train?
I love it because then I can visit all my family and friends in Auckland. Normally when I go to Auckland, I try and catch the $20 bus.
Yes.
From the CBD to the Auckland CBD to CBD. Basically, sometimes it goes by the airport. Which I think is great. But a train is cooler, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Trains make me less car sick.
I love trains.
But I think as well, like, you need to be thinking about buses are only so big,
Yeah.
And they still rely on the road. Whereas, the amount of people who theoretically live in Auckland and Hamilton and would have some desire to go between, relatively high. Trains to me, where you can just add a carriage.
Well, they've already got trains from Palmerston North and the Wairarapa that people catch to commute into Wellington every day.
Yeah.
And that's a far lesser population than Hamilton and Auckland. So I do think it can work. I would like to see the times reduced quite dramatically over time because I think it's a big problem because it's 4 hours a day.
Oh, okay. Do you mean duration of trip?
Yeah, the duration of the trip because I think it's 2 hours and 20 minutes. I actually think that's actually faster during peak hour. I'm not sure if you ever tried to drive to Auckland during peak hour.
Oh, I tried to avoid it.
Yeah, and you can easily spend 3 hours.
Yeah, for sure.
If not more. And that's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
Although we'll see what happens once the expressway opens, but I don't think that's going to make much difference.
Yeah. I think that in terms of the train, one, trains are cool, but also two, you can do so much more. Whereas, stuff like in a bus, you can't really use a laptop or whatever.
This kind of motion on a bus.
Yeah. But also on a bus, you're crammed together. You can't go to the bathroom. One time I took the bus from Hamilton to Otaki on the Kapiti coast.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a 12-hour bus trip.
Yep.
It was possibly the worst 12 hours I've ever spent in my life. Partly because I was so paranoid that when we stopped to go to the bathroom, the bus would leave. And one time it was kind of like gearing up to leave and I was like, no! So I love the idea of a train where you can go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
You can have a cafe on board. You can, use the Wi-Fi, which you just, you don't get with a bus. I think it solves,
Do you know anyone in your inner circle that would actually use the train?
To Auckland?
Yeah.
I mean, I would use it. I'd 100%.
Besides yourself?
Yeah,
I would probably use it now and then if I was going to a gig or something.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
The amount of just in terms of concerts, totally. But also there's so many of my friends in Auckland who I went to uni with in Hamilton, now live in Auckland, but who come down every so often to visit, friends and family who are still here. For sure, who I'm 100% would rather take a train.
Mm.
Especially I live quite close to the train station, so I'm kind of like, yes, I will pick you up.
Frankton is the first stop, isn't it? And then it goes to the base?
The other way around. So the base is more north than Frankton, so it would come through the base into Frankton.
Oh, right. Okay. Yep. I see. Yeah. Okay. I get you. So what's your campaign trail been like? Since you're a CEO, you're on the board, I'm sure you've got a whole bunch of other things you're probably doing, and while trying to run a campaign.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen on your Facebook page a few events.
Yep.
that you're at
Yeah.
and hosting.
It's pretty intense. I kind of like, I work from about 8:30 in the morning till 6 at night, and then I have about half an hour, and then I come home and eat dinner, reheat some leftovers.
I
And
will say, I think you have actually like a pretty good, decent shot of winning.
thanks.
I actually do. It's because I'm. This is a pretty bit of a funny story, but I'm part of this tax and rates group.
Yeah.
That I kind of got swindled into joining.
How do you? Okay, sorry. Continue.
Yeah. But anyway, I was talking to them because they have a meeting once a month.
Yeah.
And at the last meeting, which was end of June, so I think it was last weekend, I think. Anyway, I mentioned to them, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to be having the mayor on my podcast. And they're like, oh, you need to talk to him about this. They know all their stuff on politics, honestly.
Yeah.
If you just come around.
Highly engaged.
Yeah, they know their stuff. And anyway, quite a few of them were saying, oh, Louise, she's the dark horse, man. She could take this out. And I was thinking, yeah, she can.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. So I work till about 6 o'clock at night, and then I come home and I spend basically from 7 o'clock through till 11 or 12 at night working on the campaign. And then,
so when you say working on the campaign, what do you mean exactly? Do you mean?
I mean answering emails, scheduling stuff in my calendar for events like this, figuring.
I was quite surprised how fast you responded to my email when I sent it to you.
That was a fast one.
Yeah.
There's some in there who have been there for a couple of weeks, and
because Andrew took like a week and a half.
Yeah.
Actually, I thought, I'm like, oh, he's not even gonna reply.
Well, it sort of depends as well. Like if you ask me to come on something like this is relatively easy. Like, yes.
Yeah.
Some stuff requires slightly more considered answers. Some stuff I have to go back and forth with my campaign team about. So.
Oh, you have a campaign?
Yeah, there's
team?
like 50 of us. Well,
50 people on your campaign team. Wow.
Yeah.
So what? You get a whole group together and you just.
Well, our campaign meetings are really fun.
I would imagine.
We generally people come over to my house and we just I have an agenda of like, here's all the stuff I've done since the last meeting.
Sounds like a party.
Well, a party about politics.
There's alcohol involved, maybe.
And yeah, we just talk about what's coming up and then kind of delegate tasks out. So I mean, I had a quiz night a couple of weeks back.
Oh yes, I saw that. Was that
Cook Street Social?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had 21 teams, and I don't know if you know how big Cook Street Social is, but it was very packed.
Yeah, it's not that big, is it?
No.
Yeah.
We thought that they would have been
happy.
Yeah.
Getting plenty of money tonight.
It was a great Tuesday night for them, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But that was 21 teams. We had what was it? It was 8 rounds with 6 questions each, and we had a $500 raffle.
Right.
I did not organize any of that. That was all my campaign team who put that on, and we raised over $1,500 just from that one event.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I mean, I cannot emphasize enough that this, while it may look like one individual person,
there's a lot of people behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean,
helping out.
It's huge, and I mean, I'm having worked in media as well, I wrote this press release ready to go, and I was like, I'm gonna send it to these journalists, and I really prepared all of that stuff, and the thing that I didn't expect was that I've not sent it because I've been inundated with press coming to me being like, hi,
yeah, well,
you're interesting.
Because I saw a video of you a couple of days ago on the Herald.
Yep.
There was you being on the project as well.
Yep.
So I'm thinking, man, this girl's getting attention.
Yep. I think so far I've been in the Sunday Star Times, the Waikato Times, the Hamilton News, the New Zealand
they all
Herald,
came to you.
Western Community News, the Project, and then there's a couple of other things coming out soon as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Confidential.
Well, it's always like I didn't know when the Sunday Star Times piece was coming out, and so I kept just buying papers every Sunday to try and find it. And then I was like, it's not this Sunday. Oh, okay, well that's fine. I just have a bunch of newspapers now, but that's okay.
Oh, it's funny.
Yeah, so it's been really, 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 really interesting, and it's kind of quite, I guess, heartening that I asked my followers on Instagram, like, are you enrolled? Do you know what council does? Do you care about this? And all of them were like, yes.
They do,
We're all enrolled. We don't want to talk about what council does. We want to know about what your vision is. And I was like, okay, because Instagram's predominantly again, young people.
Yeah.
I say,
Well, I mean, because I talked to Andrew about this in
Yeah.
terms of how to get more young people interested
Yeah.
about politics, which, I mean, he's more of an optimist probably
Yep.
than I am. I'm a bit more skeptical
Yep.
because I'm young, you're younger. So, like, I know because I was not into politics at all in my late teens, early 20s,
Yeah.
late 20s even. So
Yeah.
it's only within the last few years I've kind of really started paying attention. And I think with social media, young people are just, I don't know, they're just not really interested and engaged for the most part, and they like everything in small,
digestible chunks.
Yeah, and politics is a very complex thing.
Yep.
Very complex. So to try and explain it to a young person.
Well, what I found though is that young people know about politics. They care about stuff passionately. They just don't know it's politics.
Can you give me an example?
So like I try and generate discussion on Instagram, and not like in a douchey way, but in just, like if I asked last night, what's one thing you love about Hamilton and what's one thing you would change? And I ended up having this really great discussion with one person who was like, well, I don't know about politics, I don't know about what council, can do about these things, but, these are things that would impact me, and if you could change them, that would be really valuable.
Such as
Better public transport.
Right.
Positively, working on building communities within suburbs, feeling connected to where you live, things like that.
When you say communities, are you talking about an ethnic community? Are you talking about a religious community, or are you just talking about any community?
Any community.
Okay.
But the interesting thing for me, right, was that this person, all of that was an opinion on politics.
Yeah.
But they just didn't see that, or didn't feel confident being like, I have an opinion on council. It was like, well, my life would be better if these things changed, or, I would appreciate it if these things were different. And I think so much of the conversations I have are about explaining that the issues that young people are facing are inherently political issues. I mean, everything is political. And if you don't feel like something is a political choice, then it's because you're not at the sharp end of it.
Yeah.
And so for me, so much of it is, trying to encourage people that, the opinions that they have are valid and worth listening to. And I went to Hillcrest High, which was really cool and slightly terrifying to talk to 600 16 to 18-year-olds. I went to a high school where my year 13 class was of 22 people. So 600, I was like, oh, I'm not cool enough to do this. But, I really made a point of saying to them, you need to feel confident enough, and you need to feel brave enough to say, hey, this stuff affects me and I don't like it. Or hey, let's do something else about this. Let's change things. We don't have to settle for the status quo.
Yeah.
Because that's what I see from young people. They're hesitant, and they don't see themselves there, so they don't feel like they can, be a part of that. And I think that's why it's really important that young people do have an earnest part of council. I'm not really interested in stuff like youth councils where you kind of get a bunch of young people and you pretend they're involved and you tell them to sit over there, and eventually maybe you'll listen to them, maybe you'll ignore them. Because that's the thing that some councils do, where they're kind of we talk to young people. We have a youth council where they get to pretend to be councillors, and we go, that's nice, shush. For me, it's about earnest representation actually in the real thing.
Yeah.
And I think something I've found particularly interesting is when people want to talk about Chloe Swarbrick.
Right.
So I have friends across the political spectrum, and a friend of ours who I would describe as certainly young Nat leaning.
Yeah.
When he came to stay with us, he just wanted to talk to me about Chloe, because this feels really lame.
Did you hear her? I think her discussion with Mike Hosking.
I didn't hear that one. I heard the one with Paula Bennett.
Oh yes.
Which was like great.
Yeah.
But yeah, like he just wanted to talk to me about Chloe, and
what? Just her particular policy and her stance.
Oh, just like, you know.
I might try and get her on here at some point.
You can try.
I can try. She might say no, but
I had breakfast with her the other day, so she's in town sometimes.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I just thought it was so interesting that, somebody from, across the political spectrum was really interested in this other candidate. And it was predominantly, youth interested in youth, much more than it was,
Well, people, if they feel they can relate to the person,
yeah,
then they're more likely to be interested
yeah,
in it. And I think
Yeah.
that's part of the problem with council at the moment is you've got a whole bunch of white old men, and, predominantly the population in Hamilton is mostly young people.
Yep.
So they're just like,
yeah,
these oldies don't relate to me. I don't care about them,
yeah. Unfortunately, yeah.
And then obviously the people who are running, there seems to be a bit more diversity this time around.
Yeah. But that's been a really conscious effort.
Yeah.
Like that didn't just magically happen on its own, I was part of a group of women in politics who actually wanted more women to run and more, diverse women to run as well.
Why do you think women don't run usually? Why do you think it's predominantly men?
I know that in being a CEO, people are shocked to see me. Like I will set up a meeting to discuss a really important contract with, a really big client. And when I turn up, they're like, and sometimes I'm a little bit mean. Like one time I was leaving a meeting and I was like, oh, and thanks for not, dobbing me in as truant. And they were like, and I was just like,
I didn't know how to take it.
Oh, I've hit a nerve here because you 100% thought that.
Yeah.
And part of that is age, but part of that is also, being a woman. And I think as well, I don't have kids. I'm not married, but that certainly makes things harder when you have people dependent on you. Which is not to say that
Jacinda's doing it though.
Well, yeah, but Jacinda's on how much a year?
That is true.
How many nannies does she probably have?
Well, if you end up being the mayor, then you'll be on a pretty sweet salary.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's what, 160?
Yeah, I think Andrew said it was 160,000. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
I can assure you that is not what I'm currently paying. I could pay off so much of my student loan. Oh my gosh, it'd be so exciting.
Yeah.
But
that would be so good. That should motivate you to want to be the mayor more.
Well, yeah, but at the end of the day,
not obviously. That's just get me mayor so I can
pay off my student loan.
Pay off my student loan.
But that's such.
But that's relatable though.
That's such a bleak.
Young people can relate to that.
But I mean, if you have to be mayor to feel like you can confidently pay off your student loan in a short amount of time, that's
Yeah, well, that says a lot about
the state of income.
Well, New Zealand is a low wage economy.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, I don't know that many wealthy people. Look, I mean, from talking with Andrew, I don't think the guy is a bad person.
Oh, this is
sure.
the
And
thing about politics, right? Is that nobody's necessarily a nasty person.
He is perceived as a douche, pretty much. I mean, before even meeting him, people were being like, "Oh, he's a dick. He's an asshole." Da da da. And I'm like, okay. But when I met him, he seemed. I mean, he's a serious guy, but he seemed nice, and I can tell he has a very big heart for Hamilton. He's really, really passionate about the city, and I do respect the fact that he even came on here because he didn't need to do it. And I mean, yeah, one of my friends was actually wanted me to ask him about the billboard thing, but I was like, there's some other things I'd rather ask him that are a bit more important rather than a billboard. I think and I probably guessed from talking to him, I already knew what his intention was anyway. He thinks there's another way of helping them rather than just giving them money.
Yeah.
It's the same way with his, that's why I didn't ask him about the pokies either, because
Yeah.
already knew what he was trying to do, but some people were, no, but then the thing is, and if you become mayor, you're going to run into this problem, is once people, if they feel like
You've wronged them
you
somehow.
wrong them, they're
Yeah.
just going to hate you no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah.
No
for
matter
sure.
what. Yeah. You can't do good in their eyes because they've just made this, they've made this, they've got this idea in their head.
Yeah. They've put you in a box.
Yeah. They're like, this person's like this. I don't like them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really, I mean, I've been a woman on Twitter, so I have some degree the understanding of
brutal.
Being put in a box and I think the thing that I come back to is that the more that you can talk with people, the more that you can engage with people, and the more that you can show that you're open to having a conversation, the easier it is to change that perception. And I mean, I've had so much press, but so much of it is 26-year-old. It's woman. It's, all of these labels. And for me, I feel I'm actually way more interesting than a lot of those things.
Yeah.
And it also means that, there are other labels that I could talk about, but I choose not to because I don't want other people to focus on them either.
Yeah.
And it's tricky. You've got to manage this perception all the time. And
because I get it, but it's a little advantageous as well for you to kind of use that because people can relate to it.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So, but I would see you getting frustrated with like, I'm more than just a woman who's 26.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I get it.
Yeah. There's pros and cons to it, but yeah, it's tricky when you're trying to show more nuance to yourself than just that.
Do you meet some people who come up to you, obviously, and then they just solely focus on that? Even if you try explaining something else to them in regards to politics, they're just so focused on the.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've had people be like, "Do you have a day job?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm the CEO of an electricity company." And they're like, "Oh," and I'm like, "Yeah, like, I have a job, and it's a fairly serious and significant job with responsibility." And the other day at work, I had to because electricity is heavily regulated industry, obviously, and so I was submitting some paperwork around what we would do if we made a loss, and a loss of calculated in the millions. What are we as a company going to do? And it's like, that's just something that's part of my job. And
dealing with a lot of budgets.
Well, dealing with risk, dealing with
that's translatable to council.
Yeah.
People might not realize that.
Well, that's what I try when people ask me about, like, oh, so why do you think you could be mayor? Or if people are like, what credentials do you bring, 26-year-old? And it's like, working out what happens if we make a loss, making sure that we don't, there's no possible way that we could accidentally turn off someone's power. Being on the governance board of, Go Eco is the largest sustainability charity in the Waikato. So, that's not a small charity,
No.
And we're collectively, as a board, making decisions about what the future is and how we can make this, entity thrive and give back to our community. And at the end of the day, both of my roles, we have stakeholders, we have people we make commitments to, we have customers, and if we don't deliver on what we talk about or what we've committed to giving to people, I don't have a job. And I feel like politics is basically that. And that's why I think that you asked me like, well, what would you do as mayor? And it's like, well, what I do as mayor, or what I could get through, I can't say, we'd solve climate change because, that's a huge thing.
Well, that's something that you can't solve in one term, let alone 5 terms.
Well,
probably.
Yeah. But it's also about, what can I bring a group of people along on a vision towards solving?
Yeah.
So a lot of what I do is talk about the issues I'd like to address. And yeah, some of that is tangible. Like I can talk about high density housing, I can talk about cycleways, I can talk about fixing the wastewater system in Hamilton West. But a lot of it is, exploring the issues that affect communities and getting their input on the changes they want to see. And, providing a platform for people to feel listened to. I met with the Rototuna Business Network a couple of Fridays ago, and they were saying about how rent in Rototuna is commercial rent is comparable to rent in the Auckland CBD.
I'm not actually surprised by that because Rototuna is getting pretty expensive.
But we had this amazing discussion where I said, like, well, what are your concerns about your livelihoods, about, the future of you and your families living here and your businesses, and, what are the changes you would like to see? And I mean, they had amazing, excellent, suggestions and talking points. And, they asked me, they were like, well, if you were elected, is this stuff that you would deal with or investigate? And I was like, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, if something is significantly affecting somebody's well-being in our city, that's something that council should at least listen to some degree.
I wonder if they listen but just don't act.
And I mean, certainly you are constrained to a certain degree around what council can do. So, like there are some things where it's like, council doesn't deal with that. That's a DHB issue or that's a central government issue. But I mean, that's the other side of politics, is that people don't know specifically what council does. And so it's really helpful in a lot of the discussions I have. I'm saying, well, actually, like, yes, this is important. Yes, this is, something we should be doing about. But if we're going to effectively target this, you should be talking to this organization, or you should be talking to this part of, how our government works, because that's how you're going to get the outcomes you need. And that's why I think, like, it's important that people are engaged in politics, because then you know how to find the solutions to the issues facing you, and you're not, for want of a better word, but, complaining to the wrong people.
Yeah.
Because then you can get stuff done.
But what do you like to do in your downtime?
Last
I
night
asked Andrew this, and
he
didn't really have much of an answer for me.
Yeah.
Because it seems like he's got a ridiculously busy work schedule. He doesn't even see his wife. So poor guy.
Well, my partner and I get to bond over our campaign because he made my website. So
that's cool.
I bring him into we hang out and have quality campaign time together.
That's cool.
But last night, I've been trying to not, like, for me, one success of the campaign will be resilience and being able to, like, come out of this campaign and be like, I didn't burn out,
Yeah.
And I'm willing to give this another go in 3 years' time. So I try really hard to schedule time to do non-campaign stuff and non-work stuff. And last night I played Overwatch and I played Age of Empires with some friends of mine. So that was
Was that on PC or was it? Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah.
How long for? How many hours?
Oh, I don't know, like 3
hours. Do you talk like
troll
talk? Troll talk?
Yeah. Well, we were in Age of Empires. We were playing expert mode. And we realized very quickly we were not good enough for playing expert mode. And I very quickly gave up trying to have any kind of civilization and basically just wanted to acquire sheep and as many sheep as I could. And my partner kept stealing all my sheep. And so there was some shit talk around. Why are you killing my sheep? And why are you stealing my sheep? And eventually he just, like, gifted me a whole heap of sheep. And our friends were like, boo! And I was like, this is true love.
That is true love.
Yeah.
I read that you are a vegan.
Yes. Well, this was weird. I didn't expect to bond or feel a bond with Andrew King around this. But yeah. So
my partner's vegetarian.
Yeah, I was vegetarian since I was about 15. And then the way that I explain it is that we pretty much eat vegan at home.
And then what, vegetarian when you're out?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is part of the problem I've found, because I'm not a vegetarian.
Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of vegetarian. At home, I'm a vegetarian because she cooks. And, but I'm pretty adaptable. I just eat whatever.
Yeah.
But she gets very, very frustrated because So she's from India, right?
Yeah.
Now I've been to India, and you can open a menu.
Amazing options,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, you've got like 30 options for just the mains, and they'll all be vegetarian. And the meat and stuff there isn't actually, it doesn't take, well, they don't, in her state, they don't serve beef.
Yeah.
And they don't serve pork. Because it's a bit of a religious state, and they don't want to offend the Hindus, and they don't want to offend the Muslims. So you've only really got chicken. But then because they're worried about bacteria, they tend to overcook the chicken.
Right.
So if you want to be a vegetarian and not have any problems, I mean, India's the place to go.
Yeah.
But here, because we're a livestock nation, and we love meat here.
Yep.
If you go to a restaurant, you're lucky if you've got 3 options that are vegetarian, let alone vegan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, I try to make the best decisions I can on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
And for me, eating is always better than not eating. So if the option is to eat hot chips, because that's the only vegetarian thing on the meal, oh no, more hot chips.
Yeah.
Oh no, terrible. So that's why I'm kind of like, I don't find a lot of value in being really strict. And for me, it's about just making the best decision as I can. I really love, have you been to Vegan Buffet?
Yeah, my girlfriend loves that place. Yeah.
I really love Dobro's, if you like kind of slightly fancier food.
I have not been there yet. I've walked past it, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe we should go there. But yeah, we haven't been there yet. Have you heard about James Cameron and Peter Jackson? They're starting this new company.
Yeah. The fake meat.
Yeah, or some type of, because I watched some interview with James Cameron where he was talking about how New Zealand needs to go meat free, and then they showed a farm, and he's like, no, and he was getting a lot of pushback, because here's the thing: I reckon in this country, eating meat, telling people to not eat meat is like going to America and telling them to stop using guns.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's an incredibly culturally important thing to us.
It's ingrained.
Yeah.
Like you take the economy side out of it with agriculture and how much it contributes to our GDP.
Yeah.
But the actual just the how much ingrained it is in our culture in terms of eating meat, and it's a hard thing to convince people, particularly if they really like it. I mean, I know some people that eat it every single day.
Lots of people eat it for every meal.
Yeah.
But like from my point of view.
But what do you do? Because I know Andrew mentioned taking B12 supplements.
Yep, I take B12.
But in terms, because I'm not sure if you know this, but in India, anemia is quite a bad.
Oh, I eat my leafy greens.
Yeah,
I never have a problem with that.
But apparently, because say steak, for example, the body absorbs it. It's easier for it to absorb iron than say other forms of iron-based foods, I guess.
Yeah.
So how do you make sure that you structure your eating habits so that you get all the nutrition that you need? Or do you just I'm not even worried about it.
We eat a lot of vegetables. I have seen a nutritionist who kind of like she got me to keep like a log for a week of what I ate, and then I gave it to her and she's like, oh, you're fine. But I have.
Did they do tests and everything on you?
Well, at one point I did get really B12 deficient, and it was you get so exhausted. It's really tired. Like you're just tired.
Yeah.
And so it was at that point where I just realized I just hadn't been thinking about it.
Yeah.
Too many hot chips, clearly. But I do honestly eat a lot of vegetables. So we eat a lot of broccoli. We eat a lot of like, God forbid, kale. Kind of your. Do
you do any like shake drinks?
No.
That you do in the blender?
I mean,
with like kale and.
No, I mean if I do, I sometimes have like berries, like a berry smoothie.
Oh yeah.
But no, I'm not really into like when I think of a kale smoothie, it's kind of like cold vegetable soup, and I'm like, nah, I'm good. I'm pretty like, I don't know, I'm pretty pragmatic about it as an approach. Like for me, knowing what I know about climate change and about industrial animal agriculture, to me, it doesn't seem something, eating meat for every meal is not something that I personally think that I can do for the rest of my life. And I know that meat is something really culturally important to us. So, if you think about what your comfort food is and think about how important it is to have your favorite meal, for me, it was about thinking about how I can transition to like a lower meat diet or a meat-free diet or a way of thinking about food which didn't rely on meat in the way that I used to, so that I could make new comfort foods, or I could make food which would be important to me, but I wouldn't feel like I was missing out on anything. Because, the more and more we talk about, the way that the world is changing, I'd rather change now voluntarily. It's like changing,
Yeah.
it's like having reusable bags and choosing to use reusable bags before there's a ban on plastic bags,
Yeah.
It's about changing when you
Well,
can.
I mean, I don't see a ban for meat coming
No,
anytime soon here.
That's a very extreme
That would be
example.
political suicide for whoever does it.
But, for me, it was just thinking about, what can I do now?
I get what you mean, though. I
Yeah.
totally get what you mean. Do you ever look at, let's say you go to dinner with a group of people and they order something that has meat on it. Are you ever like,
I really miss
I want
pies.
that.
I miss pies.
Oh, pies are awesome.
There used to be a place in Hamilton that did amazing vegan pies, and they used to do a butter chicken pie that was vegan, and it was so good.
How is it butter chicken if it's vegan?
They used that
So it has the sauce, but it's not.
It's got that sun-fed
Or is it that
fake chicken.
Fake chicken?
Yeah.
That tastes like chicken.
Yeah, but you do have to be careful. Sometimes when stuff is too real, I kind of just can't. I'm like, no, it's too, like, I don't know. I've conditioned myself to that's something that I don't eat. And so sometimes if it's too real, I'm like, no.
So you know how they're working on meat-free meat.
Yeah.
So meat that's grown in a lab as
Yeah.
opposed to killing animals.
But
right?
it's still like actually meat.
Yeah. So would you eat that or no?
I mean, like, theoretically, yes.
Like, let's say, because obviously that's if that changed around the whole world, then obviously that would cut back problems with climate. It would affect it greatly.
And there's no like animal cruelty.
Yes, there's no animal cruelty. Yeah, which is part of the reason why my partner is vegetarian as well. But so, would you be open to eating meat under that?
I mean, I think even.
Or would you still be like, nah, it's still too real for me?
On a ideological level, even eating meat that was raised properly and cared for and wasn't industrial or farmed, like, I don't personally have any problem with eating that. It's just really expensive and I choose not to. And at the end of the day as well, it weirds me out like, because I've not eaten meat for so long. So I mean, like, I don't have a problem with other people eating meat, and I don't think there's anything wrong with eating meat. I just personally feel that for myself, the amount of meat that I was eating and the conditions in which it was grown and farmed and killed and was not something that I wanted to be a part of.
Which is fair enough.
Yeah.
My view is everything in moderation.
Yeah.
And that goes for any food. So like, you shouldn't be smashing back just lettuce all the time because you're probably gonna need some other foods.
Yeah.
And I also don't think it's good to eat meat all the time either. And then I think you also have to listen to what your body is saying. If your body's telling you, if your gut's playing up after you eat something, then stop eating it.
Yeah.
Or, if you find your body, you're sluggish or tired, then you probably just need to incorporate some other additional foods into your diet.
Yeah. So I had quite an interesting experience growing up because my mum's a celiac. So she can't eat anything with
that's
gluten or
gluten.
wheat.
Yeah.
So for a lot of my life, I pseudo had a celiac diet because my mum would cook for her and she'd cook for me. And obviously I would eat whatever she ate.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was really interesting when I came to halls of residence and I was like, pasta, like toast, like all of these kind of foods that growing up I just never had because we didn't eat pasta because 10 years ago there wasn't good gluten-free pasta, and so I feel like people's relationships with food is something that's always been like quite interesting to me.
I've got this weird thing whenever I go to the grocery store. So
Yeah.
I go to Pack and Save. I've got this habit of just looking at other people's trolleys, just seeing what they're eating, and like, oh yeah, okay, all right, that's interesting. Yeah. It's actually
Like people watching, but like trolley watching?
well, yeah, you don't make it obvious.
Yeah.
Because then
You're
you just
chill
look,
about it,
yeah, and then
obviously.
you just look like the weirdo checking out their food. Like what's up with that? But I often look, and the common thing is Coke,
Yeah.
frozen pies.
Yeah. Easy food, right?
Yeah. Bread is another one. Chips.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's actually quite surprising and shocking to me how many times I'll look in a trolley, and the trolley will be stacked with food, and you've got hardly any vegetables or fruits in there. There'll be like 8 packets of bread and 4 bottles of Coke, and then maybe some beer and chips and nuts.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about, food being culturally important to us. You want stuff if you're working 2 jobs, 3 jobs, if you have, kids you have to feed, if you've got, stress, if you've got especially financial stress, you don't want food to be this huge burden,
No. Well, also junk food seems to be cheaper than
Oh, for sure.
eating healthy, and that's part of the problem. And we have a duopoly in this country where you've got Countdown,
Mhm.
and then you've got New World and Pack and Save, which are owned by Foodstuffs.
Yep.
That's why it's good that Costco are coming here.
Oh, really? You're pro Costco?
Yeah, have you ever been to Costco?
No.
Okay, so I went to Costco when I was in the States.
Yeah.
And everything is just in bulk. It's massive. You bought like a massive, I mean, not that I'm saying people should do this, but I just did it because I was overseas. But the massive bag of M&Ms got this big for about $12 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, and like the small one is about but this was massive. This is honestly massive. But everything is in bulk.
Yeah.
When you get to the checkouts, you can get, that if you go to, well, you probably wouldn't know, but in Wendy's, if Wendy's, when you order a combo, if you get large, they give you this massive drink.
Yeah.
It's about this size.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you get that and a hot dog for $1.50. That's in Costco. And they also have like they do these nice ass pizzas as well. But it'll be obviously a while because it has to be a nationwide thing rather than just being in West Auckland.
Yeah.
So as someone who's been a student and knowing how hard it is, is there anything you can think of that could possibly assist students more, or is it just a matter of like, well, you just have to do two jobs on the side?
So,
or just live with no food, or just eat BK.
I honestly find it so frustrating, and it makes me so angry when people talk about poverty as a student as a rite of passage. Like, I'm just...
Well, it shouldn't be a rite of passage.
Well, but that's what people say, like, oh, but that 3 years toughens you up for the rest of your life, or whatever. And I'm like, get in the fucking river. Sorry, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, you are allowed to swear.
It makes me so angry.
I have rappers on the show, trust me. People swear, and they definitely swear.
Because it's just, to me, I was a student for 6-7 years, and it was so incredibly demoralizing and depressing.
Is it just the fact that you can't do anything when you have any free time, or is it the fact that you can't afford to eat or have a luxury?
I mean,
or is it encompassing all things?
Well, so my study workload was a 40-hour workload.
Right.
So StudyLink, I think, gave me, from memory, about 160 or $180 a week. So my rent was normally about, I don't know, 120. So if you think about what's $40 to buy groceries, to put petrol in your car, or for bus money, for any, God forbid, you need clothes or technology or anything else, toiletries, basic stuff like that. Yeah. It's an incredibly difficult thing to manage. And so that's what I was entitled to as a student. And so obviously I worked jobs on top of that, but then you're turning a 40-hour week into a 60-hour week or an 80-hour week. And I mean, like, my studies hugely suffered because of that. I mean, I went from, you know, nailing. I was an A plus student when I had my scholarship and didn't need a job, versus when I handed it in and I got a B plus for my thesis. So I mean, there's a huge, difference in my literal grade.
If you're stressed and you're
yeah, but your brain
you're,
doesn't make good decisions as well when you're stressed.
yeah, or you're anxious, or you're tired.
Yeah,
your brain's not going to work properly.
And I think as well, it's definitely that. It's that constant needing to be working and doing something of value so that you can, feel like you've got, rainy day money, or you've got, whatever comes up as being covered. And I mean, that ties back into what I was saying before about, having moved 7 times in 8 years.
Yeah.
Finding a bond money that often is really, really tricky.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it's this bad here, I wonder what it's like, because I'm not sure if you know, like in Wellington, it's getting
I've
ridiculously
heard horror
bad.
stories.
Yeah, and Auckland. So my partner, her friend's cousin, recently moved over here last year, and anyway, she was staying in this place, and she spent New Year's with us, and then we drove back to Auckland to drop her off. And I'm not exaggerating when I tell this story, by the way, but we went to her place where she was staying on Dominion Road, which is one of the main roads in Auckland. And anyway, we walked into this apartment complex. I knew as soon as I saw the elevator, I was thinking, okay, this place is going to be terrible. I just knew it was going to be terrible. Anyway, we walk in, we get to her room. Now, first of all, you walk into the lounge, there's 2 people sleeping in the lounge.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 people sleeping in the lounge. You go into the first bedroom, there's a family sleeping in there, a father, a mother, and about a 7-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
Just in this one room.
Yeah.
And it would be smaller than this studio. Like, it'd probably be maybe half.
Yeah. So what you can see on camera?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe. And then we went to her room.
Yeah.
And there was a bunk bed. One guy sleeping on top. She was sleeping on the bottom.
Yeah. With
another dude on the bed. This is a single bed, by the way. And the dude wasn't even her boyfriend.
Yeah.
It was just some random.
Yeah.
And she was still paying, I think, $150.
Wow.
And that's without...
That's just rent?
That's just rent. That's not even expenses. So I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And if she's going through that, there must be hundreds, maybe thousands of students going through similar things. Maybe in Hamilton, maybe in Wellington. And and with the way, because everything has a compounding effect, right? So if house prices continue to go up, then what happens is the landlords increase the rent.
Yeah.
And then they put that on the students, and then students are forced to pay. You could easily end up with 8 people in a 3-bedroom house, maybe later on, not too far from now, and it's horrible. Man, this is depressing talking about it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the other things about council. I mean, I was deputy editor of the student magazine Nexus.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the local body elections, we interviewed some candidates, and I remember a guy saying, like, we asked him, what would you do for young people in the city? What would you do for students? And he had the most condescending and just like, honestly, offensive comment where he was just like, students, like young people and students should be seen and not heard, and I would put a liquor ban on 24/7 or something ridiculous like that, where it was just like, students are irresponsible and should just stop having fun.
How old was this guy?
Oh, I'd say over 50 easily.
He's probably thinking to how it was back in his day.
Well, this is
because
the thing,
cost of living has changed quite. Well, yes, obviously you got paid less back then, and to do with inflation, but houses didn't cost 10 times your income.
Yeah. More than that in some cases.
Yeah. And there's all these additional things that you need now, like phone and internet.
And they're not optional. People think that they're optional. Like, you could just go without, and it's like...
Nah, you need a phone in this day and age. You need internet in this day and age. Well, you might be able to go to a library and maybe use theirs.
Well, it's if you don't have access to it yourself, it's incredibly difficult to access the services you need to basically be a part of the community.
Yeah.
Or be a part of, the society of the city. But yeah, I remember like reading this guy's responses and just being like, why are we printing this? This guy doesn't know. He doesn't understand the serious hardships that we're facing if all he thinks is that, we just drink too much alcohol and we're stupid and irresponsible, and it's like,
Well, there probably are some that are like that,
but the majority, when
the
you think
vast
about the
majority would
majority,
not be like that. They're too busy studying.
well, that's the thing that always weirded me out about, like, oh, students take so many drugs and drink so much alcohol and blah blah blah, and it's like,
Well, they probably just need a release too.
I didn't have any money for alcohol. Like, alcohol is so expensive.
It's an expensive habit to drink, actually.
Yeah.
So I actually wonder how so many of my friends spend so much money on alcohol, and I'm like, where did you get the money from?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a
But,
hard topic.
Stuff like that turns people off politics, especially
Yeah.
young people when all you hear is, condescending opinions.
What's your opinion? Because with automation, right?
Mhm.
I would imagine that some degrees will probably become obsolete in maybe 5 to 10 years. Like my dad always used to tell me, you should do a trade, you should do a trade. And thinking back on it now, I'm like, I should have done a trade.
Trades are so valuable.
Well, yeah, but there's still this negative stigma.
Oh,
like,
for
no,
sure.
you need to go to uni.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that everyone should go to uni and everyone should do a trade. But obviously you get paid while you're working.
Yeah.
And then they're incredibly in demand now. But there are some degrees. I mean, I know a lot of people that have come out of uni and they can't get a job in their field.
Yeah.
They're working at, warehouse or BP or
Yep.
something, and they have a degree in like the Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Commerce or something, and they just can't find a job. I got a friend who recently finished studies. He's got a Bachelor in Marketing, and he lives in Auckland, and he's struggling to find a job up there. And I just feel for these guys because they've got these massive loans, and
Yep.
they're having to work in these minimum wage jobs, which don't really pay the bills, particularly in Auckland.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know how you fix the problem.
Yeah. I mean, tying it back to automation, there's already jobs that are nearly obsolete because of automation. If you take like bookkeeping, for example, that's
Yeah.
Xero entirely does that now for you, basically. But I think that, so my job we're an automated electricity company.
Mhm.
So you know how big the Genesis building is in town?
Yeah.
So our electricity company could run with 3 people if we really wanted it to. So compare 3 people with the Genesis building.
Yeah, which is a big building.
Yeah, and that's one of however many locations in New Zealand that they have offices. So for us, obviously we're not quite the same scale as Genesis, but that's what automation can do. I mean, we can offer the kind of services that we do because we're automated. We don't have the same overheads.
Yeah.
So there are lots of, positives to automation, but, you need to be thinking about how to use technology for good. So our electricity company, how it works is that when you join as a customer, you choose a community organization, which we call Good Causes, and we give 1 cent of your price to that good cause. And what that means is that last year, the top 5 electricity companies in New Zealand, which hold 87% of the market share, earned over $9 billion in revenue collectively and gave between 0, so like literally nothing, and 0.08% of that back in donations to the community.
Wow.
So there's lots of money to be made off electricity.
Yeah.
But you don't see a lot of that going back into communities. And so what we do is, through our automation, we can offer a competitive price, and we choose for you to tell us where you want some of that money to go back to. And so what that means is, for every 1,000 average customers who have paid their bills, that would be $70,000 a year going to that community organization, which otherwise
wouldn't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you think about the ecosystem of charity currently in New Zealand, margins are super tight, funding is extremely competitive, and it's incredibly hard to make ends meet as a charity doing significant and important work in our community. And so if we can provide an avenue, basically for them to have a core service like electricity be going back to them without needing to, apply for funding in the same way you would normally, regular reoccurring payments into your bank account, that's the opportunity for significant change.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's how we use automation for good. And yeah, maybe if we were an old school company, we would have hired a bunch more people from the community. But part of what we do at work, so there's my company, we have a bunch of other companies sharing a space, and we kind of work as a social enterprise technology like incubator.
Yep.
So a place for startups to kind of hang out. And we share resources, and what it means is that, we have a technology team who builds our system.
Mm-hmm.
But they can actually now go off and build other stuff. They don't have to stay and work for us full time and be continually working on what we're doing.
Yeah.
You actually free people up to do other stuff. And that's, that's the good side of automation is, you don't need people to necessarily do menial tasks, but you need to give them the opportunity to do other things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, automation does create new jobs, and
Yep.
with technology, I mean, one job becomes obsolete, but then new jobs are created.
Yep.
So it's an evolving circle, I suppose you could say, in some senses. Yeah. Yeah. So do you have a successor in place for when you would if you become mayor?
I know that it will be a discussion that me and my boss will have. Being the CEO, by the way, does not mean that you are, I am the boss, kind of.
I'm not a business person.
There's still somebody above me.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So that's a conversation I have quite a lot, though, is that people are like, oh, but you own this company, right? And I'm like, no. I was hired to run it. There's like a distinction there.
Yeah.
So what that means is that people are like, oh, this is a thing that you made up. That's how you got to be CEO. And I'm like, no, somebody gave me this title.
Because I always thought CEO was, the ultimate big cheese, and they run everything, and they don't have a boss, or their boss are the shareholders or something.
Well, yeah, I mean, my boss is our director. So he owns the company.
Okay, so he owns it and you run it.
Yeah, and he's the one with all the money.
And you're not like, hey.
Well, I'm like, hey, can I spend it like this? And he's like, yeah, okay. Or no. Do I have a successor?
Well, is there plans in place in the case that you win?
So if I was mayor, it would be pretty unlikely that I could do both.
Yeah, I would imagine it would be impossible.
I could do both badly,
considering the hours that Andrew does.
Yeah.
Which I think he said was 7 to 8. Sometimes he gets home at 11, which is insane.
Yeah.
And he's always attending different events and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, I would certainly, if I was mayor, I'd certainly have to hand it over to somebody else. If I was a councillor, I think...
you might be able to do both?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, councillors are paid about 60,000, I think, from memory.
Yeah. So you're running for the West Ward?
Yeah.
Yeah, West Side. Yeah, okay. What area does that cover, actually?
Everything west of the river. So that's from...
That's a lot.
Yeah. We're kind of lucky at the moment in that explaining how the electorates work in Hamilton is basically which side of the river do you live on.
So is there just West Ward and East Ward?
Yeah. And then, so you elect 6 for each.
Each ward?
Yeah. And so being in Hamilton West, I can't vote for Hamilton East candidates. But everybody can vote for the mayor.
So you vote for yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the thing. If I ran for Hamilton East, I couldn't vote for myself, and that'd probably be awkward.
Why not?
Yeah,
of course. Yeah. Of course. Okay. Cool. Well, I might wrap up here.
Yeah.
Is there anything you wanted to add before I close out? Do you want to tell everyone where to find you on social media and how to contact you?
Yeah. So
just expect a delayed response, people.
Yeah, I have automated.
I've gotten your automated email.
Yeah.
That's why I text you this morning. I'm thinking, did she get my email? I don't know.
I did see it, but I was like, It's now part of the list.
Yeah, and I didn't want it to get to like 3 and then like, oh my God, I don't even know where to go. Yeah.
So you can go to my website, which is mayor.louisehutt.com, and that's Hutt with 2 T's. You can follow me on Instagram at Louise Hutt, again, 2 T's. I'm Say Cheese Louise on Twitter, and that's because I used to be a photographer, so that's why that handle is like vaguely interesting. And basically go to vote.nz and you can check your enrollment or you can enroll, and you need to do that sooner rather than later so that you can vote.
Yes. Make sure that you vote. It's very critical. You cannot complain about
basically.
politics if you do not vote. So make sure that you vote. Cool. Hey, this has been great.
I'm glad you think so. I'm glad you don't think I've been a boring politician.
No. This has been awesome. I like these type of chats when it's more of a discussion rather than just me asking a question and then just sitting back. That's what I prefer. But some people prefer when I just shut up. So they've actually even said that.
I thought you were interesting.
I try to be interesting. But hey, if you win, you need to come back on.
Yeah.
And we'll do another 2 hours.
Yeah.
I think it's been 2 hours. Yeah.
Has it? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. All right, guys. Until next time, have a good one and stay safe. See ya.
See ya.